Hi, welcome back. Sorry that we got cut off so quickly on that last one. I need to do a better job of setting a 15-minute timer so I know when my 15 minutes are up. But let's just keep that conversation going. Again, and I'm going to change the color this time. This is the crucial part in that example I just gave you, recognizing that there already was a square root of 3 attached to the information that we were given. And so when I look at it as it's supposed to be the short leg number, right, which is x, times the square root of 3, well, if I already see the square root of 3 on my long leg, then my short leg is just that number that's in front. And so in this problem, my short leg is simply just 6, which means I can write 6 by my short leg, and then I get my hypotenuse by multiplying that by 2. And so again, those are important things that we'll see. Let me draw another one just real quickly here for you. So 60, 30, here's our 90. Let's say they tell us that our long leg was 8 root 3. Well, again, normally it's x root 3, and I already see that square root of 3. So they kind of just cancel each other out. And our short leg is just the number in front. So that means our short leg is 8, and then our hypotenuse is twice as big, so it's got to be 16. Now, again, sometimes they give you the information like that. Other times they just tell you that, it's just 10. And if you just see the number with no square root of 3, that's when we do this whole process of dividing by the square root of 3, right? 10 divided by square root of 3. But if we see that information and the square root of 3 is already attached, then once again, it's just simply that number in front. Now, let's just keep going through these practice problems. Here we go. We have two more triangles again. I'm just going to focus on the one on top. I recognize that there's a 30 in one of the corners, so that makes this a 30, 60, 90. I'll put a 60 in the missing angle. And across from my 90 is my hypotenuse. That's what y is. Across from my 30 is my short leg. And I don't have anything there, but I see this congruent mark and this one down here, meaning those two pieces need to be the same. So this top one should be x as well. Again, that's my short leg. And then the long leg is across from the 60. That's where 15 is. And so remember, just like our conversation, sometimes we see a square root of 3 on that leg, other times we don't. When we see it, our short leg is just the number in front. When we don't, we have to divide by the square root of 3. Notice this is just 15. It does not have the square root of 3 there. So we have to divide by the square root of 3. And so x is going to be, and remember, x is our short leg. It's going to be whatever 15 divided by the square root of 3 is. And that's going to give us a decimal. And that should be 8.7. So that means our short leg is 8.7. And once again, our hypotenuse is always twice as big in a 30, 60, 90. So 8.7 times 2, 16.4. All right, a couple more examples. This time we have a 45, 45, 90. We don't see the 45s, we definitely see the 90, but then we see these two sides being the same. Remember, our 45, 45, 90 is our right isosceles, so these have to be 45. Now, the information we are told is that our hypotenuse is 10. Remember, in a 45, 45, 90, that's the one with the square root of 2. And so your hypotenuse is supposed to have a square root of 2 attached. When it doesn't, this is where we can solve for x. Remember, x means a leg. That's what this x and this y is. We can solve for it by dividing by the square root of 2. And so our legs will be 10 divided by the square root of 2. You put that into your calculator, you will get 7.07. And so that's what our legs will be. And remember, in a 45, 45, 90, both legs are the same. So x is 7.07 and y is 7.07 as well. Couple more. This time we have a 30, 60, 90. We know that because we see the 60. Let's highlight the triangle we're going to work with here. So this top red one, meaning the blank angle's got to be 30. And so this time the information we have is actually the short leg. And that's nice because that's the one everything's based off of. So if you find your 90, our y is our hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is always twice as big as the short. So if the short is 20, then y has to be 20 times 2, which is 40. And then your long leg is always, so that's where x is, it's always your short leg times the square root of 3. And so x is going to be 20 root 3. And those are our two answers here. All right, next problem. Here's a square, and we've drawn a diagonal in it. And so the idea here is, right, we see a congruent mark, a congruent mark. Here's a triangle. It's an isosceles triangle, which makes it, and since it's a 90-degree angle, a 45, 45, 90. Remember, both legs are the same. So since one of the legs is 13, x has to be 13. And then y is across from the 90. It's our hypotenuse. It is always our leg number, so 13, and then times the square root of 2. And that's that. All right, let's do a couple word problem examples, and that's it for part 4. Don't worry too much about simplest radical form. We'll do it if it makes sense. Otherwise, we can do decimals, and there's no problem there. So side length of an equilateral triangle is 15. Find the height. And we've worked with heights before. So equilateral triangle means all 3 sides are the same. And it tells us that the side is 15. And since all sides are the same, all 3 will be 15. And remember what the height is. The height from a couple part videos ago is when we draw this imaginary line that creates a right angle with the bottom side. And remember, it always splits it in half. So if the total was 15, now each side of that line we know is going to be 7.5. Now, the other thing about a equilateral triangle is all 3 corners are 60 degrees. So this one's 60, this one's 60, and then the altitude splits the top 60 in half. So each half of this one is 30. And so now if we really just look at like this half of our equilateral triangle, I'll draw that on the right. We've got a 90-degree angle here. We know that this side is 15. We know this bottom side got cut in half, so it's 7.5, and our height is what we're missing. But we know this corner is a 60 and this one's a 30, so this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And so across from our 30 is always our short leg. Across from our 90 is always our hypotenuse. Notice our short leg is 7.5. The hypotenuse is supposed to be twice as big, and it is. 7.5 times 2 is 15. And so that makes our h be the long leg. The long leg is the one that always has the square root of 3 attached to it in a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And so our h is simply our short leg, which is 7.5, with the square root of 3 attached. And so if you type in 7.5 times the square root of 3 into your calculator, it'll tell you roughly 13.0. And then the units are centimeters. And so that is the answer for the height of our altitude, or the height of this triangle. And by drawing that height of the triangle, it turns our equilateral triangle again into a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And we can use the 30, 60, 90 relationships. All right, now let's work with a square. Perimeter of a square is 20 centimeters. Remember, a perimeter is add up all the sides. And so there are 4 sides in a square. They all need to be the same. So one side will be our perimeter, which is 20 divided by 4. So each side in this square is 5. So let's draw that real quick. Again, remember a square, all 4 sides are the same. So 5, 5, 5, and 5. And they want us to find the length of the diagonal. The diagonal connects opposite corners. So that's what we've got right there. Also remember, in a square, every angle is 90 degrees. And then these 2 sides are congruent, right? And so if we kind of look at this half of our square, it's actually a triangle, and it's a right triangle, and the diagonal cuts those other 2 90 degrees in half, and so it makes it a 45, 45, 90 right triangle. And we knew the legs of each one, because the legs are actually the sides of our square. They are the same, and so it's our hypotenuse that is the length of our diagonal, and the hypotenuse is always the leg number with the square root of 2 attached. So the length of our diagonal in this problem is 5 root 2. Now, we're looking at centimeters here, and so the length of the diagonal, I'll call it D, it equals 5 root 2 centimeters, or you could put 5 root 2 into your calculator, and it'll tell you 7.07 centimeters if you'd rather have a decimal. And there's our answer. All right, now, number 3 is like that in reverse. The diagonal of a square is 10 inches. Find the perimeter. So let's draw a square, draw a diagonal by connecting the corners. I know that's 10. I also know that if I can focus on this triangle that the diagonal creates, Since it's happening in a square, it's going to be a 45, 45, 90 again. And so really what I need to do, remember both these sides, we'll call them our legs, but they're actually the sides of the square, are going to be the same. So what I need to do to figure out the perimeter here is use this diagonal, which is actually, because it's across from the 90, the hypotenuse of our 45, 45, 90 triangle. I need to use that to find a side length. And then once I do, I can multiply that by 4, and that'll give me my perimeter. Now remember, in our hypotenuse, normally it equals x times the square root of 2, right? Where x is the length of a leg. And so we need to solve for x for that. And so our leg is going to equal 10 divided by the square root of 2. This is the one where we just have to divide both sides by the square root of 2. So one side in this example is going to equal, well, 10 divided by the square root of 2 is 7.07. So again, this leg here, 7.07. So is the other one. And if we come back to our square, remember, all 4 are going to be the same. And so if we add all those 7.07s together, that'll give us our perimeter. Or if we just take 7.07 and multiply it by 4, that'll give us our perimeter. And when we do that, we should get 28.28. Units are inches from up above, so 28.28 inches. And that is it. Now, guys, I just want to offer you a little encouragement on this part. 30, 60, 90 and 45, 45, 90 problems can be challenging, especially as you're getting comfortable with the pattern. And so just do your best to grind through this. Just try to practice some problems. Email me with some questions if you have them. And just know that this will be useful, but you just got to get used to it. And the only way to get used to it is to just practice it. So keep doing your best. Let me know if I can help you. And thank you very much. Remember, there's going to be a homework review video as well, so I'll keep trying to teach this tomorrow, and keep doing your best to practice it. Thanks a lot.